everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am back with my pre-holiday book haul. After September, I try not to buy books because my birthday and Christmas are coming up, so I don't want to step on anyone's toes. But today I do have a lot of books that I bought at the beginning of September. I went with Marissa of Blatantly Bookish to a local library book sale and found some incredible things, which I will show you in a moment. I do have one pre-order that came in as well, so I'll show you that first. That one is The Last Pages & Co. book by Anna James, and this one is called The Last Book Wanderer. If you haven't read the entire Pages & Co. series, I highly recommend that you do it. They are truly delightful. It's a middle grade series about Tilly, and then we discover other children and other adults who can literally step into books and interact with the characters and potentially change the outcomes of those books as well. It is the best bookish ride. They are cozy, they are sweet, they are just delights. So I'm hoping to read this in December. Then the first thing that I picked up at the library book sale aren't so much books, but they're books on CD. The library decided to get rid of their entire Archangel Shakespeare collection, which was a series of audio recordings of all of Shakespeare's plays. And I think they were done in the early 2000s. So I picked up one of my favorites and two others that I haven't listened to yet, but I loved the cast that they chose. So my absolute favorite is the recording of Romeo and Juliet, which stars Joseph Fiennes as Romeo and David Tennant as Mercutio. And I love that combination, and I love the scenes where they get to play off of one another. It is truly incredible. Also, Elizabeth Spriggs, who was Mrs. Jennings, I believe, in the '95 Sense and Sensibility, plays the nurse. Then I picked up The Tempest. I have read all of Shakespeare's work, I just haven't necessarily listened to these particular recordings. But I had to grab this one because the cast is truly incredible. This cast includes Adrian Lester as Ariel, Jennifer Eel as Miranda, please tell me how to pronounce her last name, I'm still not sure, Simon Russell Beale as Antonio, and Jamie Glover as Ferdinand, among others. And that sounds delightful. And then finally, I had to pick up The Winter's Tale because this cast includes Sinead Cusack as Hermione, Kieran Hines as Leontes, Eileen Atkins as Paulina, and Time the Chorus by Sir John Gielgud. How could I not pick this one up? Then I found some truly incredible physical books as well. The first of which is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I cannot believe that I found a used copy of this. I have been looking forward to reading this for ages. I loved Hamnet. I've been hearing wonderful things about this one. This one, I believe, is about a young woman who we know there is a portrait of her, who was sort of sold into marriage quite young and may or may not have been murdered by her husband, and this chronicles what might have happened to her. And that sounds wonderful. I also bought this copy of Bloomsbury Girls by Natalie Jenner. I did read this about 2 years ago as an ARC, but I wanted a physical copy because it was just wonderful. It's a sort of sequel to the Jane Austen Society, since it follows one of the minor characters in that novel as she moves to London and starts to work at this bookstore in Bloomsbury. And it examines the patriarchy in book selling, in the publishing industry. There's romance. There are all sorts of celebrities walking through the store, and they get invited to meet, like Daphne du Maurier, I think, and who else? Peggy Guggenheim and Samuel Beckett. It was just a delight, and I highly recommend it. I also found Antoinette's Sister, which I've been wanting to read for ages, and that's by Diana Giovinazzo. And this chronicles one of Marie Antoinette's sisters. Which one? She had many. Maria Theresa had a lot of children. Maria Carolina Charlotte, who is known as Charlotte. And she's a young teenager, and one of her other sisters, Josefa, is promised to marry the King of Naples. However, I think Josefa dies before she can marry the King of Naples, and so Charlotte is promised to him instead, and it follows her. I know very little of 18th century Italian history, but I love Maria Theresa as a historical character. I find her fascinating. Marie Antoinette is slightly more frustrating, but still very interesting, so I'm really excited to see what another one of her daughters was like and had to say. I also found the Bedum Stacks by Natasha Pulley, which I think is a sequel to The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. It certainly takes place within the same universe. I read that one last year and I really liked it, so I'm intrigued to see where this one goes. I think a lot of Natasha Pulley's books, especially this particular series, takes place in a sort of steampunk alternate Victorian universe, and it's quite fun. Speaking of alternate universes, I also found The Mortal Word by Genevieve Cogman, which is part of a series that I started 3 years ago called The Immortal Library, The Invisible Library. It's also very steampunk 18th century, and there's a central library through which you can visit various fictional realms, and you follow two characters who are trying to solve a bigger mystery. There are dragons involved, literary jokes involved. I remember really liking it. I don't remember a lot of the first 3 books. This is also book 5, so I need to read book 4 before I get to this one. That was a very jumbled summary, but it's what I remember. But I could not resist picking this one up, since I also have book 4, so maybe this will spur me on to continue the series. Marissa also convinced me to pick up An Unrestored Woman by Shobha Rao, which is either a whole novel or a series of interconnected short stories focusing on women affected by, I think, the division between India and Pakistan in the 1930s. I'm just going to double check and make sure I got that right. Yes, it's exactly that, except the division happened in 1947, not the 1930s. And that sounded wonderful, and Marissa highly recommended it, so I had to pick this one up as well. They also had an incredible collection of classics, one of which was Ralph the Heir by Anthony Trollope. This is, I think, another standalone. I'm collecting so many Trollope novels now, which is easy to do because he wrote so many. But hopefully I will get to this one at some point. Honestly, I don't want to know too much what it's about, and that goes for most classics. So I will have this on my pile, possibly for Victober, possibly for whenever I feel like it. We'll see. I also found Postern of Fate by Agatha Christie, which is, I think, book 4 or 5 in the Tommy and Tuppence series, which I really love. I have only read the first 2, so I don't really want to know what this one is about in case it spoils things about Tommy and Tuppence's relationship. But again, hopefully this will spur me on to read the next couple of novels through the library and then get to this one. I also found this wonderful vintage Penguin copy of Man and Superman by George Bernard Shaw, which I have heard wonderful things about. I know nothing of what this play is actually about, but I do like Shaw as a playwright, and I'm hoping to maybe be able to find a recording of when Ralph Fiennes did this for the National Theatre many years ago. I'm not sure if I can, but if I can watch it and read it, that would be wonderful. I also found The Ladies Not for Burning by Christopher Fry, which I never realized was written in the 1950s, but it's a satire of medieval comedies. and that sounds pretty wonderful. They also had this gorgeous Persephone edition of Diary of a Provincial Lady by E.M. Delafield. And I have had the sequel to this, Diary of a Provincial Lady in London, on my TBR stack for 4 or 5 years now. So I was so thrilled to find this copy of the first book. This is pretty much what it sounds like. I think it's the diary of a Victorian lady who's living out in the country, her adventures with her neighbors, her finding love, and then the next book follows her as she is married and moves to London and all of the culture shock that comes along with that. Okay, so it's not quite Victorian, it was at least written in the late 1920s. I don't know if it's meant to be historical or if it's meant to be contemporary. I also found The Children of Henry VIII by Alison Weir, which apparently used to be called the Children of England, and I love Alison Weir as a historian. I've read her biography of all 6 of his wives. I've read her study of the princes in the Tower, so I'm really excited to see her take on Henry's at least 3 children, and to see if she takes on any of his illegitimate children as well. I also found this beautiful copy of Miss Buncles' book by D.E. Stevenson. I've been drawn towards this series for ages, as they are beautiful, and I've seen them on Kate Howe's shelves. Susanna Fullerton highly recommends them, so I'm really excited to get to this one. This sounds wonderful. I'm just going to read you the back because I don't think I can summarize it any better. So Barbara Bunkle is really strapped for cash, and so she decides to write a novel. And stumped for ideas, Barbara draws inspiration from her fellow residents of Silverstream, the little English village she knows inside and out. To her surprise, the novel is a smash. It's a good thing she wrote under a pseudonym, because the folks of Silverstream are in an uproar. But what happens to the characters in her book starts happening to their real-life counterparts. And does life really imitate art? It just sounds delightful. I can't wait to read this. They also had this gorgeous copy of Aurora Lee by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I've never read either of the Brownings' poetry, but I've heard fabulous things about this from Kate Howe, from Roz from Scallydandling About the Books, so I'm really excited to give this a try. I know it's a novel in verse, clearly about someone named Aurora Lee. That's really all I know, but I'm very excited to give this a try. I also found The Scapegoat by Daphne du Maurier. I don't always get along with Daphne du Maurier, but this premise sounds wonderful. As far as I understand it, this man goes to France and bumps into this other man in an inn one night, and they look absolutely identical. They have a good laugh about it and then go to bed. The next day, he wakes up and discovers that the other man has stolen his identity and is nowhere to be found. So now he has to imitate this stranger, and things go from there. That sounds wonderful. I also bought a copy of Grindle, which I have already read. I read this in high school. Beowulf was one of our summer reading texts in my second year of high school, and then we read Grindle as a class afterwards and compared the 2 perspectives. So since I still have my copy of Beowulf, I thought I would add this to the mix. If you're unfamiliar with Beowulf, Grendel is the name of the monster that Beowulf is trying to vanquish, and this novel retells the story of Beowulf from Grendel's perspective. For some more poetry, I picked up The Gift, which is a collection of poems by Hafiz, who I've heard things about. I haven't read a lot of his poetry. He was a Sufi master, so I'm assuming this poetry was originally in Arabic. So I don't know. Oh, it says right here, Daniel Ladinsky did the translating, and I'm excited to explore this work that I've heard referenced but never actually read. An important note, Hafiz was also from Iran, so they may have been in Arabic or they may have been in Farsi. I'm not sure which. I also found this delightful copy of The Dutchess of Bloomsbury Street by Helen Hanff, or Helene Hanff. which is the sequel to 84 Charing Cross Road, which I loved listening to last year, so I've been meaning to get to this one for ages. And I particularly love this edition because while the outside is unprepossessing, the inside flap looks like that, which is pretty fantastic. So thank you to Meredith Crossman, whoever you are, for giving me this delightful copy. And lastly, I picked up another American Girl book from one of their newer characters. So these are the newer editions of books that you will get for their historical characters. This will help with my comparison video that I'm working on, and Melody just sounds like a really interesting character in and of herself. This is only book one, so there is a second that I need to track down. But Melody is growing up in, I think, the Detroit area in the 1960s. And all she really wants is to get a solo in church. She loves to sing. That is her goal. But she's surrounded by these outside influences. For example, her older brother is trying to start his own Motown group and trying to get a record deal. Her older sister is away at college and coming home and bringing home stories of the civil rights movement. And then when Melody faces discrimination herself, she has to synthesize all of these different influences to try and find out what can she do to try and make a difference. That sounds delightful. So even though I may not be a fan of the new format, I'm really intrigued to see her story. So those are all of the books that I picked up this fall. Let me know down below if you are particularly excited to see one of these books on my list or multiple books on this list. Let me know if you particularly loved any of them. Don't let me know if you hated them yet. I'd prefer to read them myself. Then we can discuss them. And let me know if you picked up anything particularly exciting this month. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.